Hi and welcome to Poly Originals with Fiona Abel-Smith. For today's tutorial we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to make a decorative link necklace and we're also going to make some wall hanging findings. Now the necklace actually started out as one of these wall hanging findings and I'll come on to that in just a second, but it came about as a result of me wanting to do something for all of the butterflies that I've been making. A lot of you who follow me on Facebook or Instagram will know that I've done a lot of these butterflies as part of my fantasy butterfly wing cane tutorial, which is on Etsy. Now this is not a plug to make you all go off and buy that, but this is a sort of a thank you for those of you who have already bought it and to show you one additional way of using your designs. So all of these are used making that design, and then what I've done is, I've finished them off using some backings. I've always been a huge believer in the saying that necessity is the mother of all invention, and having made all these butterflies I was desperate for a way to make them into wall hangings, but not just wall hangings, but I wanted a way that you could actually hang them in lots of different ways. So you didn't have to hang them like that, you could hang them at an angle or like this, or even going upside down, depending on what the purchaser wanted to do with them. And also then you could have a whole flock of them, so not just one but a whole sort of lovely grouping of butterflies going up a wall. So lying in bed, sort of trying to come up with an idea, as I get most of my best ideas at night whilst I'm not sleeping, I thought the best thing I could do was come up with something a bit like this cog design, where there's various little holes where, having sort of stuck a pin in the wall, you can then sort of hang your piece in various locations. But that would need to be on like a collar of clay so it stands proud enough to be able to get into the hooks, and obviously I needed something much bigger than that. And that was the idea I came up with, but it was whilst actually putting that into practice and designing it in polymer clay that I suddenly realised that I actually also wanted something that I could hang ribbon around. So that wouldn't work. So my brain went very quickly through a transformation of going from cog to something with holes in either side. If you've got holes in either side, then you can put something like a D-ring in and perhaps move the D-ring around. Or rather than moving it around, why not have it in place all the time? So why not have several D-rings? Then I tried experimenting with coils of wire. That didn't work. So then I thought, well, I'd actually make coils of wire and snip them in half and then perhaps bring them down. And it was whilst I was doing that I suddenly thought, why not just use jump rings? So that's how the idea came around, to make this wall hanging finding that you could then move around and have in loads of different places. So having done all of that and come up with a design and started working on it and being very happy, and I loved the idea that why not make it attractive, because I like the backs of my pieces to look almost as nice as the fronts, and I thought that was quite an attractive way of doing the finding on the back. And then I decided I needed obviously quite a few of them because I'd got quite a few butterflies, so I made 9, baked them all at once, and then after I baked them, put them all down, put them on the work table, and as I put them on the work table, suddenly realised actually these would work really well just as links to make into necklaces or designs or to add into your jewellery. So for something that came from an idea just to make a butterfly be able to sit in many different directions on a wall has ended up being both a wall hanging finding but also a decorative link necklace. And I'll take you through how to do this very simple technique, which can then be used in lots of different ways to create hopefully some lovely things for you. So let's start by going through the equipment we need for today's tutorial. To make a single decorative link you don't need a lot in the way of equipment. Polymer clay blade, a craft knife, something like this cable needle. This one happens to be 4mm, and we're just going to use the end of it just to create some grooves. You need a cutter. This one is 2 centimetres across, or about 3/4 of an inch, and I've worked out this is a particularly good size to use with 7mm jump rings. Now, these are just the plain and simple jump rings you get from any jewellery store, online store or bead store, something like that. I'll be using a bead pin, but a simple stretch of wire or something sort of this sort of thickness, a needle will also work. We're just going to use this to make a mark to give us an idea of where we're going to put things. A little bit of liquid clay just to join 2 layers of polymer clay together, and I've just decanted some into a pot. If you don't have any liquid clay, then a little bit of PVA glue would work just as well for what we're doing. To make the actual bead itself, or the decorative link, we've got a small amount of clay. About ½ ounce or 14 grams is enough to do 4 of the decorative links, and I've just got a lump of that. We're going to do black for doing the back of the butterfly. And then some form of cane. Now this cane is actually from the petal cane with inset detail, and I've just made myself a little one of those and then just reduced it down in size till I've got to the size I need for covering over the top, and I'll come on to that a little bit later. and I'll put a link to this at the end of this video, but also in the video description below, so you can follow through and do a link to that. But just use whatever you've got, and I'll show you the size we're going to need, as in the width from here to here, in order to decorate our piece. And then just to add a little bit of bling, I've just got some of these chatons. These are 4mm ones, and they're the ones, if you can see there, with the little pyramid bottoms. And again, you can buy these from most bead shops. And you need a small tile to bake on and some aluminium foil just to tent the whole thing to protect it should the oven spike during baking. If you're going to use the wall hanging finding and want to add it to something, and I'll show you how to add that onto the butterfly I showed you at the beginning, then you're going to need some additional black clay, or whatever colour you want to use, and cover the whole of your piece in unbaked black clay at the moment. To bake the butterfly on, I'm going to use a larger tile, and I've got a piece of card cut out to the size of the tile, so that when I turn the butterfly right side down, it's not going to create a shiny bottom on the back of the butterfly. I'm going to use a laminated sheet to work on. This happens to be a measuring sheet, but I'm not really using it for measuring. But if you did want one of these, it's from the usual place, www.printablepaper.net. This is the 4 squares to 1 inch one, but you can get this in centimetres instead. To texture the back of the butterfly, I've just used a little bit of this texture sheet, which actually is underlay from IKEA, and I've just chopped off a little square, and I like using this because you can either have a nice square pattern, or if you scrunch it up, it gives a really nice texture on the back of the butterfly. If you wanted to make the decorative link necklace, so make several of the decorative links and join them all together, you'll need some jewellery pliers, a couple to open the jump rings, one to cut any of the head pins you're going to use, and I've used smaller jump rings to join the links together, and these are 5mm ones. I then finished the whole thing off with a bit of decorative chain, and again this can be bought from bead shops and lots of places online. To add the little extra beads on the bottom, I've just used head pins, again from bead shops, a couple of extra thickness jump rings. These are the 7mm, but these are thicker than the ones we use in the links, just to support on the end of the chain, and also to add the lobster clasp to. And then just a selection of glass beads, or anything you've got to hand, just to add the little decorative bits on the bottom of the necklace. So let's start with the wall hanging finding, because that's where it all started. I've thoroughly conditioned my black clay. For anyone unsure about conditioning clay, I do have a video with a few tips and hints for how to get clay nicely conditioned. But I've put one part, cut it into 2 equal parts, one part through on my thickest setting. On my pasta machine, my thickest setting is 0 and my thinnest is 9, and I've put one part through on my thickest setting, so 0, and that's actually about 3mm thick, because you want the thickest piece you can get to give yourself a nice raise when we're doing the backs to our wall decorations, to make sure that it stands off the wall decoration enough that a pin can actually sit inside the loop we're going to add. If your machine doesn't have thick enough for that, then do a thinner setting and put 2 layers together till you get the right sort of thickness. And you can also do more than 1 layer of this if you wanted to. For me, for the butterflies, 1 layer on my thickest setting works fine. And the other half I've put through on setting number 3, so a sort of a medium setting, the 4th one down, and that's actually about 1.5mm, and that's the bit that sits on top because it doesn't need to be as thick. So taking the cutter, I'm just going to press down and twist the cutter because I want a nice neat edge. One of the thick one and one of the thin one. Get my little tile that I'm going to bake on. Take the thick piece off and just run your fingers around to make sure there's no mess where the cutter's cut through. Turn it upside down, because you'll find the cut side, or the bottom side, is slightly larger, so you're going to put the 2 pieces together. So do the same with the smaller piece, make sure there's no dirt on it, and then put that to one side. We want to mark out roughly where our rings are going to sit, so with a piece of wire or something like this bead pin, I'm just going to mark down, press across to start with, then go diagonally across, and again. So we've got our 8 places marked out where we're going to put our rings, and then very simply put your ring so that the join is towards the middle, and just sit it so it sits halfway down on the clay but sits out for the rest, and add all 8 rings in the same way. Having put them all on, have a look to make sure that they're spaced evenly and make any adjustments that you need. Press them down, get a little bit of the liquid clay or the PVA glue, not a lot, just a little dab. You just want to make the surface sticky, just to help embed those rings in. That you could do without it and the ray would sit in, but it just helps to get them nicely set in, just adding a little bit of the liquid clay, and obviously clean your fingers. And then you should just be able to take this piece and sit it on top. You'll find that it's slightly smaller now than the underneath piece, because the underneath piece just spread out when we put the rings on. But just press it in, and then with something like the cable needle, just roll it down to create a groove in between each of the rings. Now this pulls the clay down in between the rings to make sure they're set down nicely. It also quite often pings the rings so they're facing upwards or just pointing up slightly, and you want to make sure that they are at least level with where they went in, so they're not pointing downwards. And have a look at how much of a loop you've got. Any that aren't out quite enough, just gently pull them a bit wider. You can always go back in, just redo those grooves afterwards. And then the last thing to do is just do a little dot to give yourself a midpoint. And now it's up to you whether you want to decorate it. So as you've seen, I decided I would decorate because it would be nice. And I chose the petal cane with insert detail, one of my older videos, which just gives a very simple way of doing a petal cane. And I've reduced it down and reduced it down again until I've got really quite a small size. And to show you this, in inches, it's just over 1/4 inch. And in millimetres, it's about 8 millimetres. And I was going to take really thin slices. I've just got it all down to the right size I want. Take your thin slices off. To do that, just use your polymer clay blade. Now, I need to lean over to get nice thin slices, so my head will probably get in the way at this point, so I'll probably fast forward. I'll try and do a couple at the side first, just so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so what I've done is, as I took a slice, so I pulled back, so I give myself a nice easy way to pick them up. And it's up to you whether you put them over where the grooves are or in between. So I'm going to put them over the grooves. And I'm just going to lay one in, so not quite up towards the centre. Go and do the one directly opposite it. And then the ones to either side. And finally the ones in between. Leaves you with quite a nice hole in the middle. So take a tiny piece of black, roll it into a ball, put the ball in the middle of your flower pattern, create a little bit of groove in the middle just by sticking the cable needle in. I'm just going to take a little bit of the liquid clay, just pop that on the inside, and again PVA glue would do. And then I've got the little green chaton that we were going to use, just pop him in the middle, and then with the edge of my cable needle I'm just going to press him down nicely and deeply into the clay. And that is basically it. So that's going to be for my wall decoration, and it'll give me 8 options as to which way up to hang it, either on a nail or with a piece of ribbon. And I'll show you how to attach it to the butterfly in a moment, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to bake this one first. So I'm going to, as always, tent the whole piece in aluminium foil to protect the clay should the oven spike during baking, and bake according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. So here we have the butterfly base that I've made. So I'm just laying it on a thin layer of the black clay. And when I say thin, again, I've put this through on setting number 3 of my pasta machine. And all I'm going to do with a cocktail stick is outline the shape of the butterfly. Once you finish that, pull your butterfly off, and then you can cut round the outline using a craft knife. Get a little bit of liquid clay or PVA glue and just lightly with your fingers or a brush, whatever you prefer, just put a little bit of the liquid clay on the back of your butterfly piece, enough to make it tacky or sticky, not slippy. If you've put too much on, just simply wipe it off with your fingers and then clean your hands. Your butterfly then sits on the backing. Peel the whole thing off and press gently into place. Make sure there's no air trapped in between. And then either with your blade or with your craft knife, just take off or chamfer the edges so it's going in a nice line backwards, and go all the way around the edge doing that. Turn him over to the right side to make sure you've got no black sticking over where it shouldn't be. And then it's up to you whether or not you want a texture. As I say, I use this underlay from IKEA, and I use the side, not the smooth side, the side that's slightly bumpy, and just scrunch a piece up. And that creates a nice texture, and just go over the whole piece to create a textured back. And that smooths over or covers over any lumps or bumps or bits which aren't perfect. Once the texture's on, again, turn to the front, make sure it hasn't poked over anywhere. And also have a look on the front to make sure you haven't put any black bits on your butterfly which shouldn't be there. Because we're now going to bake with the pattern side down, I've just put a piece of ordinary card on top of my tile to make sure the bit that's sitting down doesn't go shiny. And then with a little bit of liquid clay, get your piece that you've already made, a little bit of liquid clay on the back, and put him down so that one bit faces upwards over the head and the one ring goes over the tail. Press gently into place. And then your piece is ready to bake. And just bake as before. I will tent the whole thing in aluminium foil and bake according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. And that's our piece finished. For the decorative link ones, the ones you can use to make into jewellery, I've done exactly the same, except that both pieces are through on setting number 3, so we haven't got the thicker piece underneath. But as you can see there, I've done the same lines through, put my rings on, same thing. Oh. Little bit of liquid clay, just to press down. And then repeat exactly the same as you did before. And there we go, that's that piece finished, and obviously done on the purple rather than on the black. And as before, always tent your pieces over, and if you're going to make something like a necklace or use these as decorative links, just do more than one. So I've actually made 9 of them just to show you some of the alternate shapes and designs you can use these for. So let's have a look at what you can do when these are baked. So for instance, here's one option, because all you're thinking about is where you're going to link the 2 pieces together. So you're either going to put them together with a little jump ring in between single ones, or put them together where there's 2 bits together. Whichever way is going to be easiest for you. You could, of course, also put them together so that one goes in between the other 2, in which case you'll put a jump ring from that one into that one and from that one into that one. So you can make these into all sorts of wonderful shapes and designs. So that was one option. And of course, with all these extra bits hanging down, you can add extra bits, extra decorations, sort of tassels on the end of them, extra beads on wires coming down. Just go as ornate as you want to do. Make these the centerpieces and then loads of different things going off the outside. Of course, you can just put them together completely straight. So have them so that two join on all the way across, and you'd end up with a bracelet. You could have much more of a V shaped like that. You could go completely abstract if you want to, so necklace sort of coming up here and you have a weird sort of shape coming down. So there are just so many possibilities. A nice simple circle, V shapes, dangles coming down, whatever you want to do. Just have fun and experiment. Having decided which way you want to put yours together, just get yourself some jump rings. I'm using these little 5mm ones, and with a couple of pliers you just unbend them to open up the hole in between, and then remember which way up you wanted your pieces to join. Put the two together and twist it back until you sort of hear a slight crunching. That's when you know that it's got back in the right place. I tend to do 2 of these small jump rings when I'm putting my pieces together. It just gives slightly extra stability. And then we were joining 2 of them together, so the ones next to them need to go through as well. And there are your first 2 pieces joined. So I'll carry on and get the rest of that all joined together, and then it'll be a finished piece. To make the dangly bits, I've just threaded some glass beads onto the end of a head pin. That's one with this on the bottom, so it keeps them nicely there. Then with the wire cutting pliers, I just cut off a piece excess at the top, and then with the round nosed pliers, simply bend the head pin back, twist your wrist around, and then pull it round to create a loop at the top. And that will then sit so that the loop faces backwards over the back of your link. And there you have a dangle, and add as many or as few as you wish. For adding the decorative chain, that sat very nicely in between 2 pieces, so all I did was I added jump rings, one on either side, to add the chain in place. And then your piece hangs nicely on the chain. So here's how I finished the necklace off. So I joined 2 all the way up the sides here, then I joined the one in the bottom to 2 of the one below it, and then the 2 of this one to 1 down below that, which left this bottom ring that I could have some bits off on the end. Now I've made this one quite long, but it also looks really nice if you have it slightly shorter, so these bits go up more like a sort of as a collar around the neck, and then just the small bit dangling down. So that's just one possibility. As I say, there are loads and loads of possibilities with this decorative link. So there we go, those are our pieces finished. So we've got our wall hanging butterfly with that wall hanging finding nicely on the back, so all those different positions that we can hang him, that way up, that way up, that way up, whatever you want to do. And as I say, you can then have several on a wall looking like they're having a bit of a fly around and a bit of a fun time. And as an extra bonus, make yourself some jewellery with those decorative links. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. As always, thank you so much for watching, and a special thank you to those of you who subscribe. I really do appreciate it. Right, I'm off to have another play and sort out some more designs to do with these decorative links, and also make a few more butterfly wall hangings. A girl can never have too many butterflies. That's it for now. Hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye.